Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Moon Knight. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I was actually surprised how much of the episode took place in the Asylum, but I guess it's also, there's layers to that. Obviously, Steven's mind is trying to determine what's real and Mark's mind is trying to determine what's real and what isn't. And obviously, I'm going to butcher her name every time, but Tauret has come before him, and I love that she's kind of like, all right, I'm supposed to be kind of like the greeting person for you. It's like, okay, I got this on the card. And she's like, wait, are you like twins or something? It's like, no, well, yeah, sort of. It's like, she's like, okay, that'll make things easier. But basically, it's about judging them, and obviously, if the scales get balanced, then you get to enjoy peace and tranquility, and essentially what the field of reeds is basically like eternal, like sunshine and just eternal peace. But if there's no balance, you'll basically be lost to the duat. It will basically freeze you into that vast sands, and basically your soul will be forever frozen there, type of thing. I'm like, wow. It's the most extreme, you get paradise, or you get, I guess to be fair, it's no different from, there's heaven, and then there's hell. I guess it's really no different in that regard, but it's still man, that sucks. Frozen, and just for eternity. And the question is, are you even conscious? Do you feel the time slipping away, or are you just like the moment you got frozen, your mind goes blank? Jumping ahead a little bit, did Steven, when the moment he got frozen, did his mind stop then and there? So if he gets unfrozen, it's no time passed at all? Or will it be he feels every moment and every second? I'd assume it's that one. Just to add the torture to it, I feel like it has to be, you have to feel every single second and moment of just, what is time in that state? But also, I think, what is time? Because you'll probably lose your perception of time considering how long you're there, but you'll still feel every moment. I don't know. But I thought it was really interesting that Tauret she ends up saying that, right, she's seen many different places that people have manifested, because she's like, right, this isn't the afterlife, it's an afterlife. And she references, what was it specifically? She says there are so many, I don't know if intersectional was the word she used. It might be, I think it was intersectional, untethered consciousness. And one of the examples she used was the ancestral plane from Black Panther. So basically, different places manifest themselves. There are different afterlives, and each one kind of manifests themselves. And I even love her being oh, it's so beautiful. It is legitimately probably the prettiest afterlife we've kind of seen. Obviously, in comparison to what Steven and Mark are seeing, it's yeah. By leaps and miles, the ancestral plane is so much better, especially what that represents, because you're surrounded by all your ancestors. There's so much beauty to that. But obviously, Mark is starting to listen to Dr. Harrow because he's slipping in and out, because the more he's remembering about his past and kind of confronting that, he's slipping back into Dr. Harrow being hey, are you okay? And I love that. It's just once again, I love shows that mess with your head, your perception of right, I'm confused, because at one moment, Mark is sitting there. I keep doing this. Mark is there with he's got a bandage on his nose, and it seems like he might have a broken nose. But then later on, he checks it, and it's not there, and it's wait, did you stick me with something? And he's like, what? You watch too many movies. We can't just sedate a patient without their permission nowadays and stuff like that. So it's right. So that whole sequence was also in your head too earlier, but it's about getting Mark to basically to balance out the scale so that they can hopefully head for the reeds and not to the frozen wasteland that's there. They have to find a way to balance the scales and kind of be truthful to each other. So they've got each other's memories, and they're walking past each door. I'm actually super surprised it didn't touch on a third personality at all, at least the third, because it's there. They saw the sarcophagus last episode, and we just didn't touch on it. But that's interesting. Mark does reference, at one point, he said that, right, he got fired from the military because he went AWOL after going into a fugue state. So even then, that third personality reared its ugly head, and neither one of them is aware of its existence, so that must have been the first time it ever popped up, maybe, for him to, like, not, he's like, hey, I was in a fugue state. Well, not unless that was a Steven situation, because that could have been either or. That could have been the first instance of this third personality, or that could have just been a situation where Steven took over. I don't know. That could easily have been that too, and now I'm thinking about it in retrospect. But I'm legitimately surprised they didn't touch on the third personality at all. But I thought it was interesting, like, the moment we got introduced to, like, the fact that there are certain memories, like, you could tell, like when he was standing in front of that car, and Steven's like, what memory is that? Mark's like, it doesn't matter, you know, just there's so many police streets. You're like, why is he getting so cagey? And then all of a sudden, like, Steven knows, like, right, you're avoiding something, you know, and it turns out he has a brother, and Mark is trying to hide all of that from him, and I'm like, oh boy. And then, like, them, like, doing the British accents for, like, Dr. Stephen Grant and stuff, and you're like, oh, because initially my thought was, oh, Steven's supposed to be not a substitute, but a projection of his brother, because my thought the entire time is like, oh, like, Steven is the version of Mark that is like, right, this is who it ends up being this case, but I thought, like, right, everything that you're not, that's what you wanted Steven to be. But then, like, when we got introduced to his brother, I was like, oh my god, is Steven supposed to be your brother? Because I was looking at subtitles, his brother's name is Randall, but their mom called him Roro. I thought what was going to happen was going to be, like, a thing of, like, oh, like, Steven's supposed to be everything your brother was. And maybe on some psychological level, that is kind of a thing. But sadly, they went playing into a cave, and they were young kids, and Mark went into the caves and played when it was raining, and it filled up, and Mark survived, and his brother drowned. And then we get to the point of, like, his mom turned on him. His mom, because every time she saw Mark, all she saw was, you're the reason why my son is dead. And he had to live with that for years. I'm not saying like, oh, what she did was right, but it's still the thing of, like, I get it, she was heartbroken and she needed to lash out. Like, she needed something and someone to blame, you know? It's like, she still had one child left, but anytime she looked at Mark, all she could see is, like, right, it's your fault. Roro's dead because of you. I want my Roro back. And it's like, that's so heartbreaking. Especially because, like, you know what? Once again, a parent's supposed to be your protector. And to know, like, she did everything but protect him. She hated you. She berated, she beat you for it just for no reason. It's like, man, that's rough. Like, that's heartbreaking, that situation. You know? And you almost feel like, because I don't know. Like, part of me just doesn't know, like, because there's also part of, I don't want to blame, but part of me also feels like his dad's to blame too, because I'm like, why didn't you do anything? Like, if, like, for your son to have suffered through that, and you know, like, you try, even when he's like a teenager or whatever, you convince him, like, no, she'll get help. It's like, no. He's like, it's not my job to fix her. It was your job, and it's like, you failed on every front. He ended up leaving, and I think he never came back afterwards. I mean, why would he ever stay? It's like, I'm old enough now, I'm leaving here, I'm tired of her abuse. He already has the guilt of, like, blaming himself for what happened to Randall, and it's like, he doesn't need her extra guilt, like, layered on top of that, you know? Because the moment Steven got to the top of the stairs, I mean, hell, she was drunk and even saying, like, right, you were always jealous of your brother. That's why I bet you did it on purpose. You're like, jeez. And I think that was on his 12th, on his birthday, too. That was him at 12, and she was saying some crap like that. You're like, damn, bro. And the moment he got to the top of the stairs, Mark was like, don't go in there. You don't need to see that. He's like, no, what happened in that room? And to now get the full context of everything of, like, right, that, once again, there is no Steven, because Steven was on the impression, like, no, I thought I was the original, that maybe I made you, but it's like, no, I was the one that was made up. I was your coping mechanism, like, basically, to deal with his mom's abuse. Because even Steven couldn't wrap his head around it. He's like, no, you can't tell. no, mom wasn't like that. Why are you remembering her that way? It's because Steven was given false memories of like, right, mom's this great person. He's like, you know, you had it good. I mean, would you rather remember the truth about the mom who beat us, who hated us? You got to live a normal life. You got to not have to live with that truth. And that's heartbreaking too, to know that Mark, like, that's a lot for, like, you know, it must rub you. It had to, like, affect you on some level, knowing, like, right, there's a version of you that got this happy life. Everything's great. Everything's fine. But you still had to hold all that yourself. The burden of the hurt and everything. And knowing that Steven's been with him this long. Steven's been with him since he was apparently 12 years old. Most of his life, he's had this dissociation. I mean, and it makes sense. Like, something like that is typically born out of trauma, you know? The guilt of, you know, his brother's death, his mother's abuse. It's like, of course, like, something would happen. And that's the sad thing. I mean, that's heartbreaking. It's like knowing in that moment, too, like, Steven switched over. But it's like, you know, once again, I mean, it's dissociative for a reason. And, you know, that's heartbreaking. And I think they added a layer to it by making us never see what Steven saw in their mom. Because all we ever saw was what Mark saw, the truth, Mark's truth of what their mom really was like. We never saw what Mark, like, we never had anything of like, oh man, here's Steven's memories with his mom. It's like, no, like, it's the, and I think that was done on purpose too, just to be like, no, like, this is the sad reality of it. And for Steven to have, like, essentially an existential crisis, because it's like, no, it can't be, because Mark is like, ever since our mom died, he's like, wait, mom's dead. It's like, yeah. And people had said that he would, because that's the whole thing. I was like, wait, what? I figured the mom thing was kind of confusing. And that's interesting, because it also means, because it goes back to an earlier conversation in the show where Layla, it was episode 2, Layla was like, oh, you're talking to your mom again? You're like, oh, so even Layla doesn't know that your mom's dead. Holy, wow. That's interesting. But I'm sure Mark never opened up to her about, because Mark kept stuff from her too, like, just because her opening, I mean, because I get it too, because by bottling that up, it's not as real. You're able to kind of bury it deep, and as long as you don't talk about it, it doesn't make it real. And in talking about his mom, he probably never talked about his mom's abuse, nor, like, he probably just said, like, oh, me and my mom don't have a good relationship. He probably left it at that, and probably, like, never really went any deeper than that. But, like I said, I did like the whole thing of, like, first, like, Mark popping out and talking to Dr. Harrow, being like, right, I'm trying to help you. You've got to be more open with Steven, because we were getting progress, because he was like, right, go back. You were delving into that memory as a little boy. I'm skipping over so much because there was so much good stuff in this. Like, the fact is, there's the room where Marcus killed a whole bunch of people. And it's like, everyone in that room is people Mark killed for Khonshu. It's like, these are people, but he's also like, right, these aren't good people. These are criminals. These are terrible people. He's like, my role as Khonshu's Fist of Vengeance is to protect travelers of the night. And that's why I did it. And these are all the people. And it's like, and Steven's like, wow, you remember all of them. He's like, yes, like, you know, you try killing someone and seeing how easy it is to forget. Because, and I think, and maybe this means something, maybe there's a deeper layer you could look at it too, of, he doesn't know their names. Maybe he does, but he knows them because I guess for him, it's like, to maybe ease the pain a little bit, he doesn't refer to them by their names. He refers to them as the location he killed them, like, oh, you're New York, because I killed you in New York. So I'm like, that's interesting. So it's like, right, every person he's ever killed stays with him. He was a mercenary, so that makes me wonder, did he ever, maybe as, like, yeah, he went working and did, but it seems like he never actively killed people, like, until he actually worked for Khonshu. That's when he actively started killing people. So it doesn't seem, even as a mercenary, it doesn't seem like he ever killed anyone. But also, we saw the events of when it happened. When he found out, because his CO, he worked with his former CO and went, you know, in the private sector, in the mercenary sector. But his CO was at Bushman, ended up, or something like that. Because I know people have constantly referenced him comic book wise. He's not in the show, but they're referencing his continuity in this. But he's the one that betrayed Mark. And I guess I'm assuming Mark never killed him, so I'm assuming he's technically still out there in this continuity. Because what was I watching? Mr. Sunday Movies, and I think him and Mason were talking about it, and I want to say, I think James was saying that obviously he's popped up, that character has popped up in different stuff, but I think it's stuff that's not full continuity. Like, I think there's a character of that ilk who popped up in, I want to say he was saying stuff like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and maybe Cloak and Dagger. I want to say there were versions of the character, but like there's never been any mainline MCU canon technically. Once again, those shows technically not being mainline that whole conversation. So I think it's still not against the continuity of the MCU proper, but not the whole thing. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. So I'm assuming he's still alive and out there. It makes you wonder, or did Mark... They never really expressly said, like, Mark killed him during that whole situation, or did Mark eventually track him down as Moon Knight and kill him? But Mark, the moment he found out, like, right, we were supposed to kill all these hostages and stuff, he tried to get them out of that situation, but he failed, and everyone, including Layla's dad, died. Because even Steven's like, Harrow said you kill all those people. And he's like, you really believe that? He's like, yeah, I wouldn't put it past you. And that's the sad thing. It seems like Mark's never actively killed people. It's always has been in self-defense. And, well, the people he's killed were people who were bad people that maybe even then he was like, no, I'm killing people in self-defense as Moon Knight. And maybe that's why he maybe still justifies it. But like I said, it feels like they're implying and making it seem that Mark never killed anyone as a mercenary. But he found his way in Khonshu's temple and he was going to kill himself. Guilt over everything that he did, and it's just kind of like, right, I don't deserve to live after all of this. And Khonshu reached out to him and even said it then. Khonshu was like, right, your mind is fractured and broken. You'll do just fine. It's like, right. So the fractured mind, they were already setting it up then and there, like that came first, you know? And that's the thing. Khonshu like knew what pain you were in, what you experienced, and he used that against you. He used you, Mark. He took advantage of the pain you were in, the knowing that you weren't able to save them, and it's like, right, promise to be like, and someone you want revenge, right? Like, get rid of all the evildoers, protect people, become my fist of vengeance, my Moon Knight. And I was like, oh, I love that. Because they've never actually straight up said the name Moon Knight in the show until like now. It's like, now it's official, like, right, you will be my Moon Knight. Because before they've always constantly just referred to it as Fist of Vengeance. I was like, that's pretty dope. So, I wonder, is that the actual official title of Moon Knight, or is that something he specifically gave to Mark? Either way. Like I said, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I thought it was interesting too that Steven made it to the outside of talking to Dr. Harrow. The moment Harrow's telling him, like, right, you want to talk to your mom, right? He's like, right, no, don't bother her. Don't bother. She'll screen calls because the salespeople call her all the time. He's like, don't do that. And he's like, here, Mark. I was like, that's kind of jacked up. But it's like, right, his job is like, I'm trying to help you, and I need you to kind of deal with the reality of it. And hearing, like, the dial tone of, like, right, my mom's gone. My mom's dead. And to know that was only 2 months ago is wild. Because the memory of him in front of the car was him outside of his mom, Shiva. I guess it's kind of like a Jewish wake of sorts. I'm ignorant. I just context clues. I'm assuming that's what that's supposed to be. Not necessarily a wake, but just kind of. I always forget what that's called afterwards. Well, because those are typically wakes, like where everyone's gathered like that, right? I forgot what those are called, where just like everyone's gathered like indoors, like I don't know if that's pre-funeral or post-funeral, whatever the case may be. Mark ended up outside and his father's son was like, come inside, and Mark couldn't, and the death of his mom, and just like it was too much, because it's that complicated thing of like, he loved his mom and he hated his mom, because he had years of knowing his mom to be one way, and then so many other years of her being another way, knowing, because he internalized so much blame, and and in that moment, and just for him to switch over to just switch over to Steven in that moment, and Steven be like, oh, hi mom, I'm lost, and you're like, that's gut wrenching. And Mark said up until now, he'd been able to, everything was kind of in line. But 2 months ago when his mom died, her death in the Shiva, it was too much for him. And that's when our lives started bleeding together. Like, that's when I stopped having control. And you're like, wow, that's fascinating. But Steven told Mark, like, no, your mom was wrong. It wasn't your fault. All the things she said, it wasn't your fault. You were a child. Like, it wasn't your fault what happened to Randall. But when the time came and they were at Osiris's gate, because on the outside, so many people's souls are being judged way to the sands way before their time, it's because Harrow's already potentially awakened Almut, and now she's raining her judgment down. And so Toara is kind of like, all right, okay, so there's no cards for this. There's no. It's like, all right, I'm gonna put my trust in you guys. But it's like, right, do you really want to go back to Khonshu? I mean, Mark wants to get as far away from Khonshu. There was that heartbreaking line from Mark where he was like, anytime he went up against someone, there was a part of him that was hoping that one of the people he was sent after by Khonshu would kill him. But it's like, because of the healing factor of the suit and Khonshu's power, he never died. So it's like, right, Mark has always been looking for death. Trying to escape all this, to escape his pain, to escape Khonshu. But the scales never balanced out, so the Duat was coming for them. And so, which all of that, especially when they refer to the Duat like that, it kind of made me think of like the Dahaka. That whole section made me think of like, I got Prince of Persia vibes from that. Especially with the Sand People, like I was definitely getting like Prince of Persia vibes in that. I thought was kind of dope. But Steven stepping up and swinging for the fence. He's like, I mean, to be fair, I prefer cricket, but still, I love, like, especially, like, he kind of lost it, like, at the end there, when he was bashing the last one with the bat. And Steven's the one that ends up going overboard, and Mark's like, come on, Steven, like, keep going, but Steven gets frozen. But in that moment, the scales balanced out. So the question is that him coming, is that supposed to be representative of him coming to terms with Steven, that he had never really come to terms with him beforehand? Or was it now that, I don't know, that I guess, I feel like you can interpret that many different ways. Like maybe it's supposed to be representative of, oh man, like Mark caring about Steven in such a way, now that all the truths are out there, and now it's like him being truthful about like, right, like, come on, please, like, I don't want you to go. Like, I need you, we need each other type of situation. And it's like, in that moment, Steven's frozen in the sands, and Mark is able to go to the fields, the field of reeds. Now, the question is, where do we go from here? How do you go about, well, because they were telling, like, Tuaret to try and get Layla to release Khonshu. So maybe like while this is all going down, because Mark knows Layla, it's like, right, Layla's going to try and like is going to get herself killed trying to stop Harrow on her own. So they needed to get back, because this is there's so many people that will die if they don't get back. And that was like something Steve was trying to explain to Mark before Mark opened up about everything, because it's like, right, we need to face this truth, we need to balance the scales, because if we don't, so many people are going to die. Layla's going to die, and that's going to be on your head. But he's like banging his head, he's like, no, I don't want to go there, I don't want to see that memory. He's like, I'll tell you everything, but I don't want to go back. Don't ask me to go back there. It's understandable why, And I thought that was just, I don't know why. I guess for whatever reason, not saying like this show was going to be lighthearted. I mean, it has its lighthearted elements and stuff like that, but it's like, I wasn't expecting like a depressing, like, but I mean, once again, something dissociative identity sort of would probably come up because of something traumatic, but I didn't know if, like, once again, to know that Steven's been with him since he was 12 years old. It kind of reminds me, like, obviously I keep making Legion comparison. Not even just the David situation. It reminds me of the Carrie situation as well. It's not a one-for-one, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of that as well. Because their situation came about because of, ever since they were babies, I believe. Ever since they were born. So their situation was what it was. But I'm so excited to see where the next episode takes us. It is potentially the finale. The reason why I'm saying potentially the finale, because currently this is set up to be a miniseries. Most of these have been, the only exceptions being What If. What If seems like the one that out of any show will most likely could go for multiple seasons. We know Loki's getting at least a season 2. Beyond that, we don't know, but everything else has seemed to be a miniseries one-off. This does as well, and the question then becomes like, right, so Oscar Isaac is set up to only do this, but that's also because the MCU going forward they haven't locked people down for multiple film deals anymore, because I think they've changed that. Because I want to say it was Kevin Feige that was like, right, he wants people to be able to go off and do other stuff, but also like, I want you to be a part of the MCU because you want to be, not just because you feel you're contractually obligated. So I want it to be a thing of like, if you're open to the idea, if we pitch you an idea, you'd be like, oh cool, I'd love to do that project. So that's what I'm thinking. And so the question then becomes like, right, he might not have like a lot of main appearances, but maybe like going forward, you could have Oscar Isaac popping in as Moon Knight going forward. We probably won't get another season of the show, but we will, and you know, he'll make appearances in maybe movies and stuff, but it won't be like a constant appearance like other characters in the past, because they're not getting locked down to like multi-year contract deals. It's kind of like sign up for something and then I don't know. I doubt, I mean, you never know, they could just do like a Moon Knight is a one and done, but I could definitely see this being a situation of, no, it's still, well, because also I'm sure, I guess it depends on how they want to handle it. Do they want to continue to make it seem like, no, this is all in Steven's head or Mark's head, and he's better by the end, and all this was in his head? Or are they going to make it like, no, this is all real, and that he will still exist in his continuity. I don't know. I'm fascinated to see how they handle it. So I would want more of this character. Like if they wanted to give us multiple seasons of this, I wouldn't mind. But I'm curious to see which way they end up falling on how they'll wrap this up with the finale. I would prefer it if the character would still exist, but it'd be interesting if they decide to be like, no, it is 100% all in Mark's head, and well, I mean, there's two ways to go about that. All in Mark's head, but he's still in the MCU. So anytime he's around other people doing his superhero thing, no one sees anything except for him. So it's like, wait, no one sees the suit. Because yes, we've seen that in the show that people can see the suit, but that could all still be inside of Mark's head. Something like that. Or it could just be a thing of like, yeah, it's all in his head, and like I was bringing up, he's just 100% cured, and he just lives a regular life, and maybe him and Layla are able to start over. Well, because that also depends on what Layla's circumstances actually are, because it's like, right, when we saw her in the Asylum last episode, it's like, was that really Layla, or was that like another, like how deep, how Inception deep are we going with like what's real and what isn't, you know? So I'm fascinated to see where where the finale takes us with all of this. It's going to be wild. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.